Hi everyone, welcome to the Tony Tan Show and Podcast. We have been asking for answers to one of the biggest questions in technology today. The driverless car, will it ever arrive? Hi everyone, my name is Tony Tan. I'm the host of the Tony Tan Show and Podcast. We have been asking for answers to one of the biggest technology questions today. The driverless car, will it ever arrive? For too long, companies like Google and Tesla have been promising us the imminent arrival of this technology. And yet, we are seeing that timeline being moved back time and time again. What are some of the obstacles that they are facing? Will this obstacle ever be overcome? Will we see driverless cars on our highways? To answer some of these questions, join us in the next podcast where we will invite Franco Chiam, General Manager, Daimler, Southeast Asia. Daimler is a holding company for Mercedes-Benz, one of the most luxurious car brands in the market, and the market leader in making commercial vehicles. Franco will share with you some of his insights and give you answers to some of these questions. My name is Tony Tan, and I'm bringing the future into the present. And I look forward to see you in my next podcast and show. So Franco, welcome to the Tony Tan Show and Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Honored to be here. Hope that I can share my experience with the team as well.
I really envy you for working in one of the most prestigious and well-known Fortune 100 companies out there, Daimler. Who doesn't know Daimler?
I think that's a good compliment. Thank you for that. I think most people know Daimler as the holding company of Mercedes. If you tell people about Mercedes, I think that's more or less the main message that we can share with the audience. Yeah.
Well, just to let you know, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of your brands and what you stand for in your organization. And it's also interesting that you are a speaker on Internet of Things and you are also a leader on innovation and digital transformation in your organization. I think one of the topics the last few years that is so hot right now is about AI. And one of the most obvious or champions of AI is the driverless car, right? It's the autonomous vehicle. Everybody's talking about it. The question is, we have seen a lot of discussion about it, but we really did not see this technology being used widely today all around the world. Now, why is this excitement about these autonomous vehicles? What's this hype all about? Why are people looking for this technology, in your opinion?
If I look at the topic on the driverless autonomy point of view, I guess people are more concerned about improving things. I think from traditionally, since the beginning of time, people want to make sure things are more cost effective, maximize use of time, of course, then reduce waste and so forth. So in the areas of autonomous driving, I will put it in the fact that people want to make sure they can get from point A to point B with a pre-designated time so that they have the maximum use of their own personal time space also to support the company. Second point, I would think that in terms of the congestion and activities, if you look at today's world context itself, different drivers have different driving habits, and this leads to, let's say, a difference in how traffic flows smoothly. And I would say even day to day, as more and more drivers are on the road, this causes a lot of congestion. And with autonomous itself, there will be kind of calculated risks, I would say, that we'll be able to adjust based on the prioritization of the drivers itself, making sure that there's a smoother traffic flow, and of course at the same time reduce then the number of accidents that will have happened.
Right. And I'm sure that if we are able to control this in a more regulated manner, we will also be cutting off carbon emissions, maybe.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think the promise of autonomous driving is very, very strong. I mean, we are talking about road safety, we are talking about human productivity, and we are talking about our contribution to climate change to bring down carbon emissions in the world. Now, I can see then why everybody's talking about that, and everybody's so excited about this AI-driven concept of the autonomous car. But from my understanding, it's not so straightforward that it is just, driverless vehicle or autonomous driving. There are actually multiple levels when we classify what is autonomous driving. Could you share some insights about what are these levels?
I think for most people, they will probably classify against 3 types, but in the general sense of the automation, there will be up to 6 types to speak of. So maybe we can start from the basic manual driving. That's where we are all more or less comfortable with. If we move into more partial automation, that's where from a manual vehicle clutch and drive, we goes to a automated gearbox today. And as the cycle move into improving some of these vehicles, we are looking into some of this conditional automation. Right. What it means is that there will be parking assistant support on, let's say, parallel parking automation. There will be specific sensors on the vehicles itself. As we progress, I guess the next level, what we're trying to do is more into the high-level automation. What that means is more guiding principles in terms of what are the road conditions, what are the weather conditions, maybe even interacting with, let's say, weather conditions. How is the road condition today? Is it a good drive to a specific location, which may be snowing for some countries, or would there be a heavy downpour of rain and so forth? Last but not least, I would say then moving forward into the kind of full automation, that's where people always associate in terms of the artificial intelligence. Personally, I will feel that that's probably not going to happen, at least in the next 20 years. Partial reason would be also then the ethics of how these kind of AI algorithms will be in place. And that would mean replacing human, let's say, behaviors as a whole. I think we are reaching high automations, that's for sure. And that would definitely significantly improve, let's say, the flow of how things will be moving in the near future. Probably 5 to 10 years, I would say. Yeah.
But it's very interesting when you look at what Google and Elon Musk from Tesla are saying that, this is imminent. They've mentioned this multiple times, the driverless car is here, and we have seen in recent months, they're moving these go backwards and backwards. They seem to be less confident that this is going to be a reality, at least for the midterm, to see this concept on the road. And you mentioned a little bit about ethics. What do you think are some of the greatest obstacles that prevent these driverless cars from hitting our roads today?
I guess for those who are familiar with, let's say, taking planes, for example, flights, some of the thought process will be most flights are already kind of automated, or they have autopilots.
Yes.
What makes it so difficult to have it more implemented on the passenger vehicles? For one who knows how the pilot works, you have a complicated cockpit, and with, let's say, tons of different switches and so forth. In the vehicle itself, basically the steering wheel and the gearbox is what drive the vehicle. But I guess the conditions around how flights are being driven versus how the road conditions are being made known to the human beings itself is quite different. On the sky, in the sky itself, there is normally not more than one plane in the flight or path, right? And yes, they have to more or less consider in terms of maintaining speed, maintaining balance, stability for the flights, and of course making sure that how they can reach from destination A to B. For those who are not so aware of, actually in terms of taking off and landing, they're still pretty much done by the pilot themselves, unless in very specific conditions they do autopilot, because that's what the limitation of the human eyes can see. Coming back then to the passenger's point of view, even with the limited controls, the condition around it are what is fascinating, because we look at the proximity of human beings around it. Today, when we look at the vehicles, when there's accidents, these are the concerns that will always be raised aware in public faces. How do we deal with this kind of safety measures and so forth? So I would say to have an autonomous vehicle on the road, the ethics of deciding whether in an event of an accident condition, how do the human beings, or let's say how does the machine replace a human being decision, that are one of the, let's say, primary cause of consideration at this point in time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing that you are saying that compared to an aircraft, besides a few birds and a couple of aircraft out in the sky, basically there's not much permutations. But when in an urban driving condition, there's a lot more things that the car has to take into consideration. I mean, there's trams, there's babies, there's old folks, there's cats, there's dogs. Anything can happen. You will just never know. Even a hamster or rabbit can run across the road.
Yeah.
And you will just never know how a car will be able to react in such circumstances. And therefore, it could be a lot more challenging. And secondly, you talked a little bit about the ethics earlier, about if a car, if that accident is about to happen, right? And then these ethic questions comes out. Could you just elaborate a little bit about what do you mean by these ethical questions when it comes to driverless vehicles?
For most people, I guess when we look at the vehicles in terms of automation, it's not any different from robotic, let's say, design. So fundamentally, it comes back to the amount of data that we use. How do we make a decision factor? So pretty much that's machine learning. Ethics coming into your question, I would say for a normal human being today, in terms of the artificial intelligence world, they categorize into, I would say, 2 or 3 different types. So artificial narrow intelligence is what we are pretty much depending on data sources. How do we do some calculations? Artificial general intelligence is where we come closer to what a human being may think of. And last but not least, there's this much research on the artificial superior intelligence, and that's what people are pretty much concerned about, whether a vehicle or machine can take the decision of a human being based on certain criteria of, like what you mentioned, if it's going to be an old lady or another human beings on the road. If I turn left, I will hit A. If I turn B, I will hit the other options. What would be the right choice? As a human being, we know that there's not always a yes or no answer. I think then the question will be, how do we make sure this translate into the right programming algorithm? And that's where the decision factor comes in place. Yeah.
Oh, that is going to be a very big question.
Yeah.
It is not just it's not so simple as just about the technology, about the car itself,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
We have some moral questions that we really have to go deep within ourselves and see what sort of framework we're going to put in place to allow these vehicles to be on the road.
Exactly. Yes.
Franco, how about the concept of cybersecurity? How do you think this is something that is something of concern when we are talking about driverless vehicles, autonomous vehicles today?
So as I would say, along the same line with ethics, cybersecurity is an important factor and will always be, because if you look at just the movie itself, Terminator, what makes a good machine versus a bad machine is pretty much depending on the programming, right? People are more or less concerned about what if today a machine takes over my job, and they're only concerned in terms of the job security. But if you take a deep further thought in terms of security, in terms of human being welfare, I think that's where the question of who maintains the control. A simple automation could mean into this context as a wipe out of a simple as a data sources,
right,
with the wrong click or button. Or if the right or wrong people get access to those information. Today we look at WannaCry virus, where hackers just gain access to our systems and they create a huge economical impact. So imagine this is being done by the machine itself, and they think probably 10, 20 or even 100 over times faster than most human beings can do. Security would be a key primary factor of consideration.
Oh, I cannot imagine if my driverless car is hacked. People have access to what I'm doing inside the car. People takes control of my car. Yeah. You know, the complications will be magnified in a scenario like that. Yeah. So we can very obviously see some of these challenges, that why the likes of Google, why the likes of all these autonomous companies, they're not able to launch these vehicles, because the challenges are very, very serious, right? We talk about cybersecurity, we talk about reliability, we talk about ethics, right? So it's not something that is we can just overcome in a day or two. Now, when it comes to this driverless vehicle, you just now you say that, oh, you know, maybe 20 years. If I were to ask you to make a calculated guess, you know, will we even see this on our roads today? Right? Because we already have some form of driver assisted systems, maybe at level 3 or level 4, but will we reach a level 6?
Maybe I go by my own personal thought process. I have this always self-momentum optimism about when you can't see something, right, it doesn't mean that it will not happen, right? Today, the world context of things, how they evolve and change, is pretty much rapidly, let's say, changing much more than what we can actually foresee and forecast. In the past, I would say that in terms of economic crisis, things happen probably in 10 years, reduced to 5, 3, now even 1 year, year on year. Would that happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Personally, as an IT person, I still feel that it will take some time. But who knows? If, as Elon Musk says, the limitation is all within your thought process. And I think most companies will agree to say that we have to think big, because that's what will drive our future. But starting small, and if things happen, they will happen fast. And that's what we have to be ready ourselves for. Yeah.
So, Franco, if you look at these driverless vehicles that we are testing right now, and some of these concepts are already on some of the roads in very controlled environment, they are already using some of these they are using the forefront of all the AI technologies that we have to offer. We are talking about maybe image recognition, voice recognition, smart devices. But in the next few years, we are also seeing the rise of another wave of digital innovation that's coming up, namely around augmented reality and 5G. How do you think this augmented reality and how do you think this 5G is converging with all this leading edge AI technology that's in our driverless cars today?
Fundamentally, I would say data is still the primary source of information. I think there's the buzzwords around the market. Data is the new oil. So depending on the right information that each companies are able to process in about, AR and let's say VR itself is not that far away. We have seen also movies and games how this has been actually put to real use. Of course, in the context, they are not really widely adopted across different use cases. In terms of 5G, my knowledge also is that China has already piloted some of this initiative, even on their auto vehicles. I think then fundamentally get back to the question again is, what kind of use case are we looking at? It would be more or less in a tight control situation, because that's where then the use of such technologies are pretty much be able to let's say contain in case of let's say unforeseen situations. But I do see that if I look at the autonomous vehicle in terms of the trucks itself, you may be aware that there are already actually autonomous trucks actually on the roads, because the conditions are pretty much foreseeable and they can limit, let's say, a specific driving lanes for long distance drive for trucks itself, for example. And such technology will definitely optimize in terms of let's say speeding up in terms of the target delivery, also optimize the use of resources like fuel and planned destinations and time. Yeah.
Right. So with this, the way you have pointed out, right, trucks are a good use case for some of this technology, and in certain areas that's already being used. And because it's less complicated, do you see that this is a threat to truck drivers with these autonomous trucks that's on the road today?
With that question, I would say the same question most people will question about is what happens if a machine takes over my job. I think likewise the same situation is, the simple answer is most people should be able to have the right mindset to see how we move forward. I think from traditional time, we come from a caveman situation where we evolve into bows and arrows, and today we are with machine guns and more cybersecurity point of view. I would say optimism plays a part. As human beings, we should be ready to say that with ever-changing skills and technology, where do we position ourselves in terms of our experience? Because that's what the machine does not have. Even if the machine can do today, they are dependent on this logic of data source that we provided. So for trucks drivers themselves, I believe the kind of experience they put through can be, let's say, involved in, for example, training, upskilling the environment. How do they bring more value to the company? Likewise, in any jobs itself today, we have, let's say, more standardized job in the factory. These are also easily replicated by robots, tele-robots and so forth. But the people are more or less trained in such a way to say that let's look at, how do we make sure this value is more delivered to the end user or the consumer? How can we improve the product further? Yeah.
The word that I really catch is value. At the end of the day, is value. Right? Our value change, as long as we keep going up the value change, then I think this is a very good defensive strategy. It's not just defensive, it is a strategy for thriving in this world of digital innovation. The next question I have for you, the way you see technologies like driverless truck, is this something that's like going to happen right tomorrow? And the reason why I ask is that, is there a timeline for this technology to be widely adopted so that people will have time to transit, as they transit to various roles within their job and they change the nature of their job, so that they have time before this technology is widespread?
I would say that in terms of technology, we are ready. That's a very factual confirmation that I can give. In terms of the actual use, coming back to what I mentioned earlier, it will still be in a tightly controlled situation. I guess eventually, until we can answer the questions from the ethical point of view, cybersecurity point of view, such luxury of a full automation will likely happen if the let's say the bodies in terms of the government bodies around it are ready to accept that the risk factors are pretty much mitigated and they can live with that. But I would say you will see a lot of POC, a lot of the pilots program will start to run.
Yeah. I mean, the other interesting question that we also consider is like how much to outfit an AI truck, right? A truck is so big.
Yeah.
I'm sure to outfit every single one of them, must have tons of computing power, sensors, cameras. And we also look at the economies, whether is it something that the price has come down low enough for it to be widely adopted as well. Would you say?
Probably it's a yes and no question. I would say fundamentally it really depends on what kind of information that we want to collect from the vehicle, right? Coming back to one of the earlier questions, we look at the plane itself versus the cars itself. The fundamental question would be, would the logic programming for autopilot on the plane be much more complicated as with a car? So in the earlier discussion, we see that probably today we already see more autopilots on the sky compared to on the vehicles. So I would say it's a yes and no answer at this stage. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So earlier you were saying that, we humans should focus on value and we humans should focus on areas, because sometimes it's not just about replacements of jobs. Sometimes it's a change of the job nature. It's not necessarily a full replacement. So we're talking about an age where human must coexist with robots or human must coexist with AI. What are the areas that you think is uniquely human, right, that allows us to coexist with technologies like AI and robotics?
Uniquely humans, I guess, if you look at the way how innovation thinking, I guess that's pretty much limited to human beings at this point of time. In terms of bringing additional value, machine, of course, they can do based on the number of data they collected. But I personally felt that how human beings evolved today is not because of it's partially because of the past experience, but also our let's say the view to do something better. How do we want to create this kind of value for our next generation? And that's what's driving us to move forward. Such things will not be replaced. I have a very interesting discussion with one of the university professor. For example, a lot of people watch the soccer, right? One of these favorite players like Cristiano Ronaldo, when he did those spectacular move, right? The question will be, can a machine do that? Right? Maybe the machine can calculate based on proximity to do that very targeted move. But given the situation, and in every match, the situation would be very different. And it takes more than just AI to do that calculated move as a human being to make that score. Yeah. So, yeah.
Not just about that move, but also the grace of making that move. I'm not sure whether I want to see a robot do a scissors kick. So, when we talk about human working side by side with technology, we are also looking at the organization themselves, right? And we know that AI is already here to stay. In fact, according to some reports, it will be a $13 trillion economy by the year 2030. And a lot of organizations out there are looking to adopt AI as part of their digital transformation process. And you are a leader in this area. I mean, you have been looking at transformation. You have been incorporating machine learning and AI in your work on a daily basis. What do you think are the three areas that blocks people from adopting innovative technology in your organization?
Coming maybe basic fundamentally would be the human mindset. I think traditionally we are more or less incumbent people. Human beings are more or less comfortable with where we are at the moment. The resilience, or let's say the ability to adopt with changes, is always the question to say, are we ready for that? As the saying always goes, do not change something, there's nothing wrong with that. Right? So fundamentally, I would say firstly would be the mindset change, and it always normally comes from top down. To be able to take the let's say the risk point of view, where are we trying to target in terms of the company? And secondly, I think in terms of the process automations, redefining how work flows are to be decided itself, are we able to live with more simplifications of tasks and activities? I think that will really bring a lot of the mindset change in the first place, to make that transformation, to say that, for example, we are able to work all fully automated via the mobile phone today. Can that be also adopted into the organization? But of course, then last but not least, technology of course plays then the key parts itself. But I would probably say that the first two are more or less the key portion for that.
So what you are also saying that is a culture of change that we need to inculcate in the organization, because change is the only constant.
Right.
So that leads me to the next question. If let's say the culture of change is important, then the leadership will have a very important part to play, especially in the future of digital innovation. And some people are calling this digital leadership, right? What do you think are some of the most important things or new skills that leaders today have to learn or adopt for them to be successful, for them to survive and thrive in this age of digital disruption and innovation?
I guess leadership quality is important in terms of in the past we are more or less organization has a top-down point of view. There are activities, there are, let's say, tasks to be fulfilled. It kind of comes down as a management strategy. If you look at today's context of what Google has done, what Facebook has done, the interesting part is that most of this fascinating technology doesn't come from the government bodies or from a high-end military background. They come from the garage of a student's, home, or they come from the university studios or test labs, and this is where the amazing things happen. So if you ask me, I would say that we really need to embrace the diversity of the workforce for a start. Understand that the younger minds maybe would have a better idea of how the world should run in the future. But of course, at the same time, they will need guiding principles from what we have done before. And that balance is essential, in my opinion, to make sure that we are in the right context and conditions to move forward. I would say as leaders, we should be ready to inspire and guide, let's say, the younger generation. How do we move forward? It's not about deciding to say what I'm right or wrong. Maybe let's take a point to say that today we agree this idea is probably not the best idea to move with. Let's do a pilot. You never know what's going to happen next. As I mentioned earlier, my favorite slogan: if it doesn't see something, it doesn't mean it's not there. So let's start with that. Yeah.
I like the point that you're talking about diversity, because in today's globally connected world, we have different type of workers across multiple generations, and there's a lot of talk about gender equality. The ability to bring together diversity, all these different talents, is actually a very critical skill, especially in this digital world today.
Yes, and in fact, to even highlight, I was thinking to expand on this point. What we've seen today in terms of the world leaders, there are more and more female leaders coming on board. Personally, with a team that I started with 3 years ago, I have the, let's say, honor to hire some new graduates. And with a, let's say, more diversified female workforce, I was really amazed with how the dynamics change. And with a lot of, I would say, different point of views and ideas itself, that really creates the synergy for the entire team. With the experienced, let's say, employees, as well as for the let's say, the male-dominated environment. People always think that in the IT world, right, it has to be driven by the male species because we are more tech-savvy and so forth. I think we need to recognize that with the right balance of ideas, that's what progression is about. It's not just getting one point of view. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because recently I just attended a talk when Barack Obama was in Singapore. And he came out something that really caught my attention, and he said that, he would really like to experiment. What if one day we let women leaders run the world for a while and see what happens?
Yeah.
And I think the dynamics, things will change, right? It's really interesting to open our mind to such possibilities as leaders.
Exactly. I think we should be ready to embrace what is possible. And let's live with that kind of change. And this kind of change, I would say, more or less positive reinforcement that I would see coming down. In fact, if I look at today's situation of what COVID has done, what the female leaders itself has actually implemented in terms of the governance measures in the countries seems much more favorable compared to other locations.
I think I know which country you're talking about. So, Franco, I know new leadership skills are critical in today's environment and moving forward. What do you think about personal branding for leaders? We know that, the last 20 years, people have always followed brands, right? But recently, we see this shift changing. People are following people. How important is personal branding to leadership, in your opinion?
Okay, that's a pretty tough question, in my opinion. Actually, I see two sides of coins. The right amount of influence would mean significantly a value-added approach personally. I will always think that there's a difference between obsessions versus the ambitions point of view. So as long as we are guided in terms of what kind of the target achievement objective that we want to bring ourselves as a presentation to the world, giving the experience that we have been through, giving guidance, or let's say sharing points of view that can be openly discussed with the public, I think that's important. Having a strong point of view it's a two sides of coin. Sometimes it might lead to a different kind of negative outcome that you might foresee. Personally, I'm more favorable towards a more discussion platform, right? Rather than having an obsession point of view. Yeah.
And when you talk about whether is it a more consensus based or more personal based kind of leadership approach style, what do you think about communications in today's world? How critical it is for leaders to upgrade their communication skills? You know, we have Zoom platforms, we have so many electronic platforms that's coming out that's totally changed the way we communicate.
100% important. In fact, the reason why I'm here also is also partially learning, and I guess practice always makes perfect. Getting the right context for information, getting the right data to be shared, that's important. And as leaders itself, we have to be clear the message that we are bringing to not just the team, but also to the relevant stakeholders that's encompassed around us. Right. Empathy, I would say, would be a key factor. Without knowing what the other, let's say, recipient is understanding what you are trying to achieve, sometimes giving a one-way ticket doesn't also make too much sense. Yeah.
You know, Franco, a lot of people will admire your job being a general manager of one of the most prestigious companies in the world. But I'm sure it didn't just happen overnight. I'm sure that you must have gone through your up and downs in life. I mean, life is not a bed of roses. Was there a moment in your life that you felt you hit a low point, and how do you feel about that, and how do you recover from it?
The grass is always greener on the other side. I guess personally, coming back to, let's say, the behavior or how one uphold your the capability to adapt with changes and the how do you adapt with problems. Personally, I do have my ups and downs. Day to day, we face challenges and problems. But tomorrow is always a better day. That's how I always tell myself. It's always the sun shines in the morning, and being able to digest and having positive reinforcement to myself, telling myself that I still have lots to do. Right, one setback doesn't mean that this is the end of the world. Moving forwards, I try better. Right. And this is how I always put myself moving forward. And I share the same with the team as well. There's no bad idea, no stupid idea. Let's try it. And if we fail, we fail together. If we success, that's what we do as a team.
Right.
Yeah.
But where do you find this positive energy? I mean, you tell yourself you need to be positive, and tomorrow you have the right positive attitude. But do you have like some kind of habit, or do you follow some kind of like gratitude practices? You know, where do you find the strength to be positive all this time?
Where do I find the strength? I guess from a working perspective, being truthful with the team itself, being able to empathize what are the strengths and not just the strengths but the weakness of the team itself is important. As they always say, the leader is as great as the team can help him to build, right? I personally do not feel that when there's a great achievement for a specific outcome that I should be the one saying that. I always felt that let's put the team forward. The team is strong, and at the end, I think this kind of achievement is easily replicated throughout for everyone. I feel happy not because I achieved something. I feel happy because my team had achieved it, and that I think will always be the momentum. How this, let's say, the positive energy, as you mentioned, will always move on down the next generation. Yeah.
So it's more like the team is the one that you focus your energy with on, and your aspirations is more towards communal. Right, achievements, yes. And then you get your joy and you get your satisfaction from there.
Maybe a bit of fun fact, like what today's movie is about. In the past, we focused a lot more into superheroes, right? Then we have single superheroes, Superman, and so forth. But today we have group superheroes, and that's what is important.
I see.
Right, in my opinion.
So earlier on, you talk about one line of code that you like to quote a lot, and what was that quote again?
Oh, okay. Personal quote is, if you doesn't see something, it doesn't mean it's not there, that you don't achieve and strive for. Because most of the time, people will tell you, this is not possible, let's not do it. But limitation, I would say, is more towards your own target accomplishment. Most of the time, when we started with a product or project, sometimes I do get a lot of negative response to say, there's already a product out there, why are we doing this and that? And I will tell the team, let's do it anyway. Do we believe it together strongly? If we do, we make it happen. Yeah, happy to say that in the last 2-3 years and the kind of environment that we have, we did deliver, and thanks to the entire team for that.
Wow, congratulations, Franco.
Thank you.
And it is something that I really am very inspired, because I read somewhere Nelson Mandela has this quote, right? He says that it is impossible until it is done, which I think is such a simple sentence, but it's so profound.
Yeah.
You know. So Coming back to this question that I want to ask you, in this COVID-19, it's, a lot of people are going through doom, gloom, uncertainty, anxiety, depression is gaining momentum. But I always think that no matter how dark things are, there are always something good. And what was that one good thing that happens to you since COVID-19 started?
Well, one door closed opens the other. One good thing personally I will felt is that I have more time to do what I actually desire. And that also means to upskill my personal knowledge. I do have a little bit more time to understand how things are moving around. In the past, if you look at how we work in the office itself, we are pretty much bounded by questions that's coming or interactions of different meetings and discussion. Granted, today will be the same in terms of remote, but I think that the manageability is within oneself. We all have the same 24 hours, and that means to say with the relevant time spent on traveling and so forth, give ourselves that 10-20% time to decide what we want to do. And I do felt granted, let's say, a good approach to see how I can improve myself further on this. Yeah.
So it's more like a reclaim of time, reclaim of space,
Yeah.
And internalize. You got more time to internalize as you start to revamp and reposition yourself for the future.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. Franco, I think this conversation has been very meaningful. We have started off with the future of driverless cars. We spoke about the ability for human and machines to coexist, and we talk about some of the abilities on how leaders have to position themselves for the future, what are the skills that's needed, and also your personal story about how it's important to focus not just on yourself but on the team as we move forward. I think this is such important information that we can all take back today and start to internalize and start to understand and declutter, right, some of the noise that's out there, that the noise is coming from everywhere, all this white noise. I think we are able now to see the truth about these patterns, or some of this, where this technology going and what are differences of these technologies, like you mentioned about the autopilot versus the car. I think I get a lot more clarity from that. So once again, Franco, I think we have come to the end of the Tony Tan Show. We thank you very much for your deep insights, and we really appreciate your time from your busy schedule to join us today.
Thank you, Tony, for inviting, and it was an honor to be able to share some of my past experience, and hopefully this can also give the audience some insights where things happening now.
And I look forward to reconnect with you sometime into the future, Franco.
Thank you, Tony.
Take care. I'll see you soon.
Take care.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you find this useful and valuable to you. And if you want to know more about our podcast, please remember to subscribe and to like, so that you will get notifications of upcoming podcasts and episodes that you could follow. My name is Tony Tan, and I'm bringing the future into the present. And I look forward to see you in my next show and podcast.